Welcome back, Rock Hoppers. I'm the game's lead developer, Stately, and today we're going to pick up where we left off after the first episode of this, our creative editor tutorial series. Today we're going to learn about the various Metablocks and how to use them. In general terms, a Metablock is a block that doesn't show up in the world as placed. So a door is not a Metablock because when we render the world, it shows up as a door. The first Metablock I'm going to show you is the spawner. This is also far the most common one. So a spawner does exactly what it says on the box. It spawns monsters. Or more accurately, NPCs. It doesn't have to be a monster, obviously. As you can see, we have a bunch of different ones. We have our Gang Thug spawners, and we have our Icer spawners, and we have our Icer Guard spawners, and most of these are stacked as well, so generally there will be a few different variants. We're going to keep things simple and put down a few Sproach spawners. Now, the way these things work is... in the game, these spawners will occasionally check to see if there are any players nearby, and if there is a player nearby and the spawner is not currently supporting its maximum number of mobs, which by default is 1, it will spawn a mob, and it keeps track of that mob. So when it dies, there's a countdown before it can spawn another one. It'll remain inactive for a few minutes. That way you can clear out a location and not have to worry about all of the mobs immediately coming back. But this is it. That's all you have to do. You put down the spawners and you're done. Now, players can't see these, obviously. The spawners are visible in the game, but they're not visible to the players. And we can test it in-game. By default, spawning is disabled in the prefab editor here, but I will go ahead and spawn mobs on with a slash in front of it, just like it says in the tutorial. And that will enable the mob spawning. They're not spawning now because I'm too close. The idea is that they shouldn't spawn under your nose. And they're not moving because I'm not here. If you're in no-clip mode in creative, the mobs can't see you. So if I do this, no-clip off. Oh, now they're mad at me. Okay, hello. Hello, little guys. And when I'm done testing, all I have to do is /kill all. So in all of these cases, I'm hitting enter to pull open the text menu, the chat menu. And then I'm typing in a command with slash. All right, and let's go ahead and spawn mobs off. And there we go. So that's the mob spawner. One cool aspect of the mob spawner is that they can actually determine which faction owns a prefab. So if I create a prefab and I place friendlies or neutral parties, such as AIM, the location itself will be marked as inhabited, and the placement movement rules for an inhabited prefab will be applied, which means I can go in there, but I can't do it at night unless I'm friendly with them. I can't build or break their blocks. Whereas if I were to put a hostile spawner down, let's say a Z spawner, the prefab ends up being marked hostile, and that means it can be a mission target. That means that the world spawner can automatically damage it so that it looks nice and downtrodden. And the fun part is you can do both. If I put a Z spawner and an AIM spawner in the same prefab, the world generator will determine when it creates the world whether that location starts out as a inhabited friendly location or an infested hostile location. And that status can actually change during the game. You can get a quest to clear out a hostile location. If you succeed at that quest, it will turn into an inhabited location. The Z spawners will turn off, the AIM spawners will turn on, all of the damage to the blocks get repaired, and the other way around, mobs can attack your friendly locations, overrun them, and make them hostile. One last thing on the subject of mob spawners before we move on is that not all mob spawners are necessarily invisible. Some of them can be just a part of the map like anything else, and these can be destroyed. The invisible mob spawners can, as a rule, not be destroyed, but these visible mob spawners, like this brooch spawner, can be destroyed by players, and they will not respawn unless the location they're in is somehow regenerated. Okay, so next up we're going to talk about the placement blocks. These are blocks that dictate how and where the prefab can be placed in the world. We have the must be solid block, and we have the must not be solid block. So what happens is the world generator creates prefab candidate locations. It puts this building on the prefab candidate location. Then it compares all of the must and must not be solid blocks with the existing asteroid it's on to make sure that it actually fits. So the obvious use for this, for example, here, if we place must be solid blocks on all four corners of this building, we make sure that it doesn't, for example, spawn on a cliff. Because this block, the block it spawns on, could, in theory, be the edge of a cliff. This setup forces the prefab to be placed in a way that looks natural. Now, I'm thinking you can probably guess what the must not be solid block does. This is similar, and this, the most common use case, is to put a couple on top of or in front of any windows and any doors so that you can guarantee that the areas you do not want to be asteroids are not asteroids. Now, I'm doing this, but I need to tell you that this is not the best or easiest way to do this mostly. This makes sense right here. Make this only place somewhere where there's nothing covering the window. But here, instead of saying all of this must be open, we're going to actually force it to be open. That's a lot easier. It's a lot faster from the perspective of world generation, and it gives you more predictable results. So that's our must be solid block and our must not be solid block. Moving on to the next set of blocks that are similar but very different. We have our make solid and our make not solid blocks. Thinking you can guess what these do, but one thing that should be explained is that these make solid blocks attempt to create natural looking asteroid surface. And what that means is that if I place this like this, I'm not going to get just a pillar of square blocks. I'm going to get a rounded, as rounded as Rockhoppers gets, obviously. I'm going to get a surface that is properly angled and padded out. And I can show you, for example, here we have the prefab for the natural arch. And that's pretty straightforward, not very appealing. But if we look at it in the world here, we can see that it's padded out and it looks more like a part of the landscape. The other thing to bear in mind is that the make solid blocks will always use the natural rock type of the asteroid they are on, or if they're not on an asteroid, the nearest asteroid. Make not solid blocks. I'll bet you can guess what these do. The make not solid block simply removes any asteroid material that may be present in a specific voxel. So what I've just done here is I've guaranteed that the blocks in front of this door are not solid. That means I can actually go through the door, because that's important when placing things, right? We have to make sure that they're properly accessible. But once again, this is not the best way to do this. The best way to do this is with the virtual wall blocks, and that is our next meta block for today. Okay, and here is our virtual wall block. Now, the purpose of a virtual wall block is to create rooms. And that's pretty much it. And the reason we want to create rooms is because anything marked as a room in a prefab will automatically have all of its asteroid material scooped out, so it's guaranteed to be empty. Sometimes, though, we want a room without actually having a room. And in cases like that, what we do is we create a virtual room. We build a room around the area we want to make sure remains empty using these virtual blocks. And we'll fast forward through this real quick, and then we'll show you the results afterwards. Okay, and as you can see, our room is now complete. This is space. This is room 103. Now, when the world is generated, this will not be room 103. The room will be in contact with the void. It's not entirely sealed off, so the room will be dissolved. But it does guarantee that no asteroid material spawns inside of this room. Another common use for the virtual block is scaffolding. You can put it out as scaffolding in case you want to place something a little farther out, like that. Now, you don't have to, but when you do that, it's good practice to get rid of these blocks afterwards because they don't really serve a purpose, and they do end up getting saved in the prefab, and it's a little bit of extra data and a little bit of extra storage space. So when you can, remove your virtual blocks. Okay, and the last two blocks I want to talk about today are the worldspawn block and the root block. So the worldspawn block, this guy right here, simply tells your player where to spawn the first time they join the game, or after they die if they select to respawn at the world spawn. There should only ever be one world spawn in the game. If there's more than one world spawn, one will be selected at random, but when you die, you select the world spawn. You might not get the same random world spawn, so from the perspective of gameplay, there should only ever be one world spawn. And that's probably not on your prefab, but for purposes of testing, you can put a world spawn on your prefab. You can delete the actual world spawn. You can generate a world, and you'll be guaranteed to spawn at your prefab so that you don't have to go out into the void looking for the thing. So that is the world spawn block. And the other one that I want to show you is the root block. But stately, I hear you say, there's already a root block. And that's true. And the root block can't really be moved because it's basically the 0, point of the prefab. But it is really, really easy to accidentally get the orientation wrong or have everything shifted one block too high or one block too low. And absent the ability to move the world root, you see that the old one went away. That would mean you have to literally tear the entire thing down and start from scratch. Now, fun fact, this doesn't actually move the world root. This moves every other block. So if, for example, I were to decide that my world root needs to be here, I accidentally built this whole thing upside down, and I place this, the colors on the background change because I have literally just turned myself around. Okay, so that's going to do it for today. We've been through the most important virtual blocks. We've talked about the must be solid and must not be solid placement blocks. We've talked about the make solid and make not solid blocks. We've talked about the spawners, these bad boys right here. And we've talked about the virtual walls and what they're good for. So that's going to do it for today. Next time, we're going to talk about the prefab setting menu, how to configure your prefab, and we are going to talk about testing your prefab in the real world. So tune in for that. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time.